mit
this,
regelmäßigem
like we had great
Balance-Training
weekend
daran,
to
wieder
come back
fit zu
and
werden.
work on
Du bringst wieder diagonal Ellenbogen und Knie zusammen.
and
10,
that's
12
exactly
Wiederholungen
how
pro
we
Seite.
don't want and where to feel. So let's look at some of the places where we can actually make the daily work of the framework easier and capture this intent. And that's really, this intent comes from recognizing the fact that web development is hard already. Right? Like there are so many technologies and languages that we can use. There are so many tools, like just learning a framework is learning the entire ecosystem. So we had this, like, we are kind of juggling a lot of technologies, but like running a marathon at the same time is probably not what you want to do every day, especially on Mondays. And many projects that were on our roadmap and are on our roadmap are specifically trying to target the make working with the framework easy. So essentially, we are saying, okay, working with the framework should be easier. The X is important, but what it really means, right? Like it's very easy to say, like, oh, we care about the DX, we want to improve the X. What does it mean in practice? And probably different teams or different frameworks will have different takes on it. But when we were discussing, it's like, hey, we want to improve the DX or mechanics of working with the framework, that's really boils down to really few kind of cornerstones. One of them being really starting with the foundations of small building blocks that we can freely compose. And so obviously the less concepts to learn, hopefully it's kind of easier to master and teach the team how to kind of operate with the smaller number of things. But also, like, small number of things is not enough. The small number of primitives should be well working together. We should compose them to create a bigger thing. So this is one, that's kind of what we spend a lot of time of our energy of, like, looking at all the APIs or all the new things that we are introducing to the framework to make sure that it's a minimal primitive, but also that it works well with the other primitives. And then when you land on this primitive, there is a time where you need to wrap it in the API. And as Alex pointed out, we want those APIs to speak in the your language of the language of the application developer instead of reflecting internally the framework. So this is kind of this being less weird, both in terms of how we speak to you, how we present the capabilities to you, but also how we borrow ideas from the ecosystem. Too often in the past, we were creating our own solutions where there were well-established solutions in the JavaScript ecosystem. And I think we want to slowly change it by borrowing patterns that work well and that we might be familiar with. So I think one of the flagship projects that all those things come together is obviously React. And that was our focus for the last few months, a couple of really. And I guess at this point, you've heard about those three fundamental concepts of reactivity that we introduced, like signals, computing, effect. Don't worry, I'm not going to talk about them here because I'm sure that you've heard a lot of talks, both from us and other team members. But what I want to talk about is this fact that there is just really, we were looking for this very small set of core primitives that can express the entire data flow or state management in the ecosystem. And like really, without going into the mechanics of signals, we probably didn't speak enough about all the nice properties that we are getting from this small set of things that can work together. So this one primitive of a signal, and computed being a signal as well, allows us to drive all the change detection that happens in the framework, right? Like this is the only thing you need to know. It's like, hey, I've got the signal, I have to read it in the template, I need to update it somewhere, and the UI should be up to date. But it's so this is the primitive or the language that you can use to talk to the framework, so it always have the UI synchronized with the data model. At the same time, this one primitive, this one language can be used by the framework to speak back to you. So input as signals or input expressed as signals is a great example of the places where we could use signals to express data changes over time to you. And probably there are many other opportunities. We will talk about some of them. Uh, Finally, this one primitive of signals can be used anywhere. Right? Like I can express my state in a component, I can move it to a service and inject it through the TI, or really declare it in the any TypeScript file if I want to. So you've got this freedom of refactoring. You can start with the state in a component and can pull it into a service and maybe like share it with the other application. And this primitive is also very interoperable. I can bridge the gap to other reactivity systems if I want to. So that's probably not new to you at this point. But I think we were not vocal enough about the fact that whereas signals of this new reactive primitive is just only a tool to catch a much bigger fish. And that the bigger fish that we want to catch is really simplify the entire data flow, like reasoning about the data flow in the application. Uh, as we were exploring reactivity and all the state management problems, we quickly realized that like mechanics of reactivity is one part of the problem, but the other big part of the problem is actually structuring your application. Like where do I keep data? Should it go to the components? Should it go to the service? How do I fetch data? How do I manage like errors in data fetching? So all those concepts are kind of linked to reactivity, uh, but um, kind of that's not mechanic work, but it involves a lot of thinking. How do I structure my application? And I think like Angular can take on some of this. And signal-based components are kind of there to ease the data flow, just kind of to make the whole reasoning about data flow simpler. So how do signal-based components kind of improve the situation? Well, we could start by screaming a developer slightly less. Uh, I I reckon that you have seen this error, right? Um, so that's kind of this is a good example. This error is a good example of a framework telling you that you did something wrong, or in framework's opinion, you did something. So what is the horrible crime that you committed that justify the framework to screaming at you? Well, you violated one of the very fundamental rules of unidirectional data flow, and the framework is very quick to tell you about. And it's all good and well. We kind of, I think, we intuitively feel that, like, if something falls in one direction, it's probably easier to reason about that it flows everywhere. That's all good. But hey, who sets the direction of this flow? Right? Like, we probably didn't answer this question in the past, kind of. And well, we kind of answered this question technically because currently in the Angular change detection mechanism, there is hard-coded data flow. It flows from top to the bottom as throughout the UI component hierarchy in a certain order. And the fundamental observation here is that uh, or like fundamental assumption here is that we saying that the data should flow exactly as the component are structured on your page. The trouble is that there are some examples of pretty common development scenarios where this assumption is not fully correct. So let's look at the form. You've got like two input fields. You want to make sure that both male and repeated male match. In terms of UI component hierarchy, we are clearly having a form that is a parent of the two input fields. No denying here. When we think about data, the form validity status is actually derived from what we got in the input field. So where should we flow this data, right? Like we clearly see those things, but not. And I think the realizations we kind of came to appreciate is that actually the data flow is independent of the UI visual hierarchy, right? So in terms of data, like the form derives its status from input, but in terms of the UI, we are kind of seeing the inverse hierarchy. And obviously, those two hierarchies needs to meet at some point because we display the data. But fundamentally, uh, we want to have data that are really computed and before we go into the change direction, before we start thinking about how data are displayed. So a lot of efforts that we are kind of doing on both uh, signal-based components and in cooperation with state management libraries, and I will talk about it in a sec, is kind of bringing some order to the data flow in the application. We want to kind of have this well-ordered, free-phase situation where something happens in the browser, you click on a button, or you've got other interaction, then all your data is computed. You can reason about your application purely in terms of data, like, is my form valid? And then finally, like you do the framework, let the UI update. And we kind of see these patterns that the applications that are successful in the sense we've got the big applications that the team can reasonably work with and evolve them actually follow those patterns. And that's what we are trying to enforce. And one of the places where we can kind of both simplify the framework and enforce these patterns are lifecycle. And traditionally, there are a lot of data computation happens in the lifecycle. And this is kind of where we start mixing both data concepts and the display components. In the signal-based components, we essentially want to solve those two problems by both limiting number of hooks and also kind of change the data. So again, today there are rules for the lifecycle hooks, like how many of them do we have, uh, at what time do they run, and so on. And I like kind of illustrate that there are rules and that they are probably sometimes not easy to follow. Like who knows? Hey Alex, I've got a question for you.
It's on Angular Dev.
No, wait. Like, right. So that's the thing. Like, I actually don't know which one run first. I think, well, I would have ng on changes, but like I don't know. So as Alex is saying, like there is probably the answer is somewhere in the documentation, and between all those lifecycle hooks that we got, there is probably somewhere indication of the order. And as much as we love our new documentation, um, and we can find the answers there, probably the best way of kind of dealing with the complexity is actually eliminating it altogether. Like if we could actually look at the lifecycle hooks and uh, kind of look into use cases where they are mostly used, you could see that most of the lifecycle hooks that are linked to change detection can be really replaced with the simple concept of computer. So again, this is one more indication of where we want to look at the framework and try to find this minimum set of concepts and slowly start replacing them with small fundamental composable pieces. Now, um, we talked about data flow and state management, and if we go back to this pattern of interaction, that data derivation or computation, and then finally change direction, that's probably, again, the pattern that you might be familiar with this because many state management libraries are enforcing this for you, and that's good. So now, are we going to take state management libraries job? Well, not, because obviously state management libraries do more for you. They can orchestrate data fetching, they deal with the errors when the data fetching fails, and so on and so forth. So instead of taking the job, we are actually partnering with the major state management libraries. Uh, and when we were starting to introduce signals, we were very early engaging to make sure that existing ecosystem works with the new React primitive. And I think we are very happy to see that at this point, most state management libraries either published RFCs or actually published libraries. And you should join Marco Talk in a sec just to hear about that. We also start to see state management solutions from the community, from parts of the JavaScript community that are not traditionally part of Vanguard. And recently we had like Tanstack query adapter for Angular. That's completely different approach from the like kind of differing from the traditional state management that is mostly based on RxJS. And speaking about RxJS, like I think we're seeing some shift to signals, and there's a question like what's the like place of RxJS in the entire architecture. And the way we look at it is that it's a very powerful tool that has many usages for advanced data fetching or data orchestration. But also, it kind of got promoted to a tool that you almost have to use. If you look at there are many websites that are trying to kind of do a roadmap of how do you learn the framework. RxJS is very uh, close to the top. And again, that there is this disconnect between we've got very powerful tool that is super useful in certain scenarios, but should we reach for this power from the start? And I think we are trying to evaluate this and potentially kind of push it down a bit in the learning. So that's about state management. The other part where we want to improve developer experience is the friction around authoring form. And probably, you know, um, all the authoring format questions are probably one of the spices in the community. There are many takes. Um, and someone's like, hey, forget about the state management thing, just let's go to functional components. And again, there are many spicy takes with many different spice level. I'm just always saying that the easiest way to animate the heated discussion in Angular communities to say like, oh, let's replace classes with functions, or maybe let's introduce GSX in Angular. And it's kind of amusing for us because that's not how we think about those problems. It's really about eliminating friction, right? Like it's going back to this corporate mandate, like oh, I need to create engine or I need to create. Like we want to remove all those friction points. So how can we do this? When there are a few things we actually can do. We can try to eliminate boilerplate, like just kind of make you write this code without losing ability to understand what's going on or even improving it. So let's look at some of the examples here. So again, we are all developers. We love writing code. This is what we are paid for. And we kind of also ask to write components like this. There's quite a bit of things going on here. And it might be a bit hard to see, but this is a simple if else statement around some DOM. So let's try going with the Alex, idea of the crystal ball. Like how can we improve this code so that in the future? Well, some of it is not really crystal ball because we introduced a new control flow which allows us to replace the star syntax and ng template with something like this. So at least hopefully the if and else is kind of invisible. But there's still quite a bit going on here. So let's experiment some more. If we look at the references to other components in our templates, we kind of see that we need to import a component twice and kind of reference it by two names. We've got both selector and the actual class name. I need to import the class name in two places and so on and so forth. That's probably the spiciest take here, but what if we look in some kind of streamlined syntax where I can directly reference a class? Again, this is not fully designed. This is not that we will introduce the thing without going through the RFC process, but something certainly that we are thinking about. Okay, so assuming that we do something like that, there we've got this standalone and signal through that kind of, that maybe we can do those default ones. So why do I have to write it all the time? So let's delete those. I hope it's only mildly spicy at this point. And finally, we've got this slight annoyance where I have to have an enum exposed as the property of a component because the only thing I can access in the component template is the property of a component. So many solutions here, but like, potentially I could have some convention of referencing JavaScript or module scope from a component type. So now we kind of did a few steps. We started from here and we ended up here, which is probably kind of dramatic difference. But we took very small and measured steps, right? Like instead of all the steps almost trivial. And that's kind of really how we think about the algorithm format. It's not like we want to change everything. We want to look at those friction points and kind of address them individually, uh, step by step. The best part of this is that all those things are really mostly easy to automate because we've got a compiler that understands current templates and can translate them. Cool. The other thing that we can improve by looking at the authoring format is actually designing about what's going on in the template. So another quiz time. Hey Alex, or the, all the Angular community, how many directives do we have here in this template? Who thinks there's less than 5? Alex. So like I think we've got like ng model is probably a directive, right? Maybe required, like 2, more than 5. Okay, who thinks that there's more than 5? Okay. Okay, conflicting messages. So, and that's kind of the point, right? Like it's not super clear. And it cannot be super clear. In fact, there are like, what, seven or, yeah,
7, yeah.
7 different directives that are mapped in this template. And many of them are not obvious, right? And that's kind of becomes the problem with standalone components because you are asked to re-import things that you are using in a template. So if you don't know what's going on in the template, it's hard to import. So that's kind of touching upon forms, and this is one of the kind of project that we want to work on to improve the situation here. But also forms are like really the great target for making the framework speak to you in signals, like validity state, is the form touch. Those are really signals in nature. So we probably want to include more of those in the form. As we do this, there is opportunities for looking at the two form systems that we've got. We've got template-driven forms, we've got reactive forms. Should we have two systems? Especially that under the hood, there is really just one form system. It's just exposed. Again, crystal ball. Testing is another area where we kind of, as we go to zoneless, uh, we are hitting this point where testbed assumes a lot about boundaries. We have to call fake asyncs or detect changes in the right points of time. This is not always obvious when you do it. Similarly, the API design is very framework and general centric. Right? Like this is what in this example here, we really want to replace one of the components in a template with the test component, but the API to do this is kind of very technical. So if you look at those examples, really, we are saying, okay, hey, zoneless data supporting to do like the testing API. But um, but it's really what we are doing here. We are looking at all those parts of the framework and take it opportunistic, like look at them and like, oh, hey, maybe we should change. Cool. So those are like immediate plan. We've got some more things going on for the team. So I want to kind of briefly touch upon 3 initiatives that are probably not very visible, but might be very impactful in the future. First of all, there is a TC39 track to standardize signals, and Pangra is part of it. We are prototyping actively. That's super interesting discussion. We've got all framework autos there. I don't know where it's going to end, but it's very interesting discussions. Same CSS animations. We actually kicked off the spec to kind of make element removal on my table. I don't know if it's the word through CSS. We'll see where it goes, but that's potential improvement here. View transitions, another kind of specifications in the works, it actually landed in the router already before it is fully finalized in the specification of the browser's implementations. Um, so lots of changes, both like short in the immediate future, like both changes that happen, the changes that we are planning, and those are changes, but um, uh, I hope like most of them are not surprising because they were either part of our roadmap or are part of our roadmap. And again, we both do those changes because we do value your time and energy, but we also kind of, I don't know, approaching those changes responsibly because uh, all the changes that we are doing to the system, we kind of feel the pain firsthand because we are in charge of maintaining or migrating all the Google applications. So if we introduce a new feature or new change to the framework, we need to both weigh the benefits by the cost of the migration. So in a way, we like the same as we value your time and energy, we absolutely kind of value our time and energy because we know that we will go through the same migration. And again, like we kind of confident in those steps because again we've got the power of ng update, but we also seen that our RFC process works very well, that you actually coming back to us and you are giving us very good and very detailed feedback on what should be implemented and what should be implemented. So we've got a very strong voice in Angular community, but we actually got a very strong voice outside of Angular community. You can actually, I think, we're talking to the team, there is, potential call to action. You can actually go to like existing surveys and let, the world know about the framework that you use and what's good there. So as the one and closing remark, we really all in it together. Thank you.